Okay, we're having people come in. Hello, hello, welcome, welcome. Nice to have you. My name is Ivan, and I have with me here Therese Noorlander from Coca-Cola.
Hello, everybody.
We will introduce ourselves in a sec. Yes. Just let's wait like 2-3 minutes so that people can steadily come in. You will see in your chat there is a link to something called Mural. Mural is this interactive board we'll be using today. So if you could just follow that link and you will arrive in the presentation. And you should also see my screen share right now. If you arrive in something that kind of looks reasonably similar to what I'm showing, you are in the right place. Hey, hello to the new people who have joined. You will see a link in your chat. If you follow that, you will arrive into something called Mural. And Mural is our interactive platform, and that's where we'll be holding the webinar today. I already see some of you joining. I have an anonymous sea turtle, a panda, a giraffe, and what the hell is this? Oh, this is a goat. If you don't like the animal you get, you can log out and then you can come back in and you'll get a different animal. There's only so many animals, and I promise I won't judge and whatever. I mean, it's not a reflection of you. It's just it's at random. I was a slug once. Not the best experience, but reasonably palatable.
It does matter when it comes to biodiversity, right? I mean,
it does indeed, and we do have a varied bunch now. I have 37 people online, 38. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Again, for those of you who are just joining, you'll see I've shared my screen, but also you will see in the chat there is a link to something called Mural. Mural is the platform we'll be using. Just follow the link and you will arrive in the presentation that we'll be doing, and it's an interactive platform, so I will give you the chance to kind of move around and see what we prepared there. And we'll also use it to interact with each other. Let's just wait, I'll say 2 more minutes, just so the stragglers come in, and then we can start, okay? Okay, let me see how many people I have on my mural now. I have 15, which is about half of what we have here, or 1/3. Duck is following you. Yeah, well, you don't need to follow me, dear duck, but actually in a second I'll summon you, and then you won't have a choice. Welcome, welcome, welcome. As I said, see in the chat there is a link, and actually my colleague now, Lucia, if you could just reshare that link with everybody, in case somebody missed it, you will be able to join the mural, and you will arrive where I am on my screen. And you should also see what I'm sharing now, just so in case you don't, for whatever reason, manage to get into the mural, you will be able to still follow what I'm talking about, okay? All right, and I'm happy to say my electricity is back online. Had a bit of a heart attack, well, a mini heart attack, because my electricity shut out just before we were starting. So I'll just duck under my desk so I can plug back my phone, if you don't mind. Okay, everything is perfect and life is good. Welcome, everyone. I'd suggest we start, because I am conscious of your time as well. We have 50-something people online. Again, for those of you who just came in, check out your chat. You'll see something called Mural there linked. There is a little link that you can follow and you will arrive at the interactive platform that we'll be using. If for whatever reason you can't get there, you will still be able to see my screen and you hopefully be able to follow what I'm talking about, okay? All right, I have a large assortment of animals here now. And what I'll do is I will summon you to my cursor just to make sure that we are all on the same page, literally and figuratively. And I'll hide all these cursors just so you don't get distracted. I have this sort of superpower where I can, well, I can decide on where you go. But I promise I will release you in a second when we get to the interactive part. So, hello, welcome to our webinar on valuing water in the Coca-Cola Company as part of the We Value Nature 10-day business challenge. I'm here with Therese Noorlander from the Coca-Cola Company. Therese, would you like to introduce yourself first and then I can go?
Yeah, sure. Well, hello, everybody, also on my behalf. I work for the Coca-Cola Company in Europe on sustainability. And for us, sustainability is a wide topic. So it goes from packaging, water, climate, also into the social aspects. So it's a great pleasure to be here today with you to talk about nature-based solutions and our link with nature-based solutions through water replenishment and our water stewardship agenda. So I'll come back to talk a little bit about that and what we've done together with Ivan and his team of Denkstatt around this topic. So exciting to see you here, and let's make this a very interactive, fun session.
All right, thanks, Therese. Yeah, so I didn't introduce myself. Sorry about that. My name is Ivan Paspaldzhiev from denkstatt. I lead our so-called natural social capital offering. And we've been working with Coca-Cola on this methodology on valuing the natural capital benefits for water replenishment projects and really starting to think about these as nature-based solutions. And we'll tell you all about that today. What I want to do first, though, is just to be able to introduce the platform and also to allow you to introduce yourselves. What I'll do now is I will release you and I will show the cursors again, just so you see where everybody is. If you could just double click on a sticky note as I do now and just kind of write your name if you'd like, or even just the organization, doesn't matter. Just so you can have a feel for how the platform works. And if any of you still want to be on the mural but you can't figure out why, check out the chat on the GoToWebinar, and there you'll see a link, and if you just follow that link, you'll be able to enter. All right, and I have all sorts of cursors hovering about. Excellent. Somebody deleted my no. What did you do? No, well, here, it will all be salvaged, I promise. Here's some new sticky notes, just use those, okay? Please don't delete my things. I mean, this is the dangers with working on Mural. People can mess up what you're doing, yeah? But if you want, you can always just double click and you can add a sticky note yourself, okay? All right, I'll give you
part of the exploratory phase, Ivan.
Yeah, I'm sure. Oh, well, now you know. If you do accidentally delete something you shouldn't, you can always just press Ctrl-Z and you'll get it back. In the same way as you would in a text sort of processor, okay? And as I said, double click and you'll be able to add a sticky note. Mine are appearing round for whatever reason, but you can also have them square and probably in whatever other shape you want. All right. I actually see some of you already hovering on other parts of my mural. No problem, no problem. We'll get to that in a second. Okay, once I stop seeing cursors hovering about, we'll move to the next part. All right, I think that's most people. What I'll do now is I will summon you again. And we'll just move to the next part. The next part is about voting. And voting here, we'll just show you how it works, and we can run through these two questions. First, we'll do this one, okay? I'll just zoom in like this so you don't get distracted by the other bit. What you need to do now is I'll just turn that on, and then you just need to click a sticky note, okay? You can't click anything yet, but you'll be able to click it now. All right, starting voting, you get one shot. So just click on a sticky note and you can begin voting. Okay, wait, somebody, I'll do it again like this. All right. Well, you know, this is the dangers of interactivity, but I'll do it like this, and then we'll start over again. All right, everybody stop clicking, okay? God. All right, okay. Start voting. Just click one. Click one, okay. One is covered that one's business, okay? Can we just agree on the one you can't actually see as business? Just click on something on one of the sticky notes. I'll just click on the business one, which is covered right now here. And then you'll be able to vote. And you can't see anybody voting now, but you'll be able to in a second once we're done. Just to have a feel of where you guys are from. Okay. Most people are done now, from what I see. All right, I'll just leave. I see about 5 people still pondering. If you are from the business sector, that's the sticky note you can't actually see because there's something on top of that. We'll fix that later.
I think we should continue, Ivan.
Yeah, I think most people have already done from what I see here on my platform anyway. Okay, let's end the voting session. And now you'll be able to see the results. We have 7 + 4, the blank sticky notes is business as well. We have 11 consultants, 11 business people, and some people from standard setting and from other, very ominous. You also see it on the screen. I'll just remove this so that we can kind of see it like this. Yeah. And then we'll move to the next question. Again, summon all of you, take control, and we are here. Let's really very quickly check where you are in terms of natural capital. Simple question, just let us know. Again, you have one answer here, and now I will release you and you should be able to vote. Okay. All right, it's working. I can see people voting. All right, if for whatever reason you struggle, just let us know on the GoToWebinar and we'll figure out how to help you. But you should just click on the sticky note and you should be able to vote. All right, I'll just give you, shall we say, 10 more seconds. It's not a difficult question. Okay, and I shall close the voting now. Again, you just need to click the X on the top right just to close the black screen. You'll still be able to see the results here on the platform. All right. End voting. Okay. Well, mixed. Some people have already carried out a natural capital assessment. Some are sort of in the middle, so wanting to learn more or have done some work in the past. Okay. Let me again do the summoning. Okay, let me just see why my cursor isn't working. Just give me 1 second. Honestly, with these new platforms, and as well, in this spirit of interactivity, please just give me 1 second and I'll be right back. All right, cool. Okay, everything's fine. Summon. Take control. And now again, you will be rudely interrupted and you will just follow me and we can actually lead you into the main content, right? The big picture. Therese, would you like to just walk us through why we did what we did?
Sure, I'd be happy to. And this is the moment where you can all sit back and relax for a bit, and we'll come back with some further engagement and interactivity for you. But let me take you through the bigger picture of biodiversity and natural capital and why the Coca-Cola Company in Europe, together with Denkstatt, conducted this work. So let me start introducing first a couple of key milestones and reports that are out there that I think are important for you also to notice, because they were actually also really influencing our thoughts and reasoning. The first one is the Dasgupta review from 2021, so just a couple of weeks, months old actually, and it's a review by a very distinguished economics professor from the University of Cambridge. A very detailed report, so good bedtime reading, 600 pages. But the essential of the report is basically that the economy and the natural world, so biodiversity, are really linked and interlinked. And so it is not only that the economy depends on diversity, but it's also that biodiversity risks are economic risks. And I think from a business perspective, that's an important insight, and it's a very strong report that helps you build those insights and gives you the right evidence. The report was commissioned by Her Majesty's Treasury, so the UK economics of the ministry. So quite an authority to release this report. Another one that I think is important for you to notice in the area of biodiversity is the WWF Living Planet report issued last year. And this report really shows the unsustainable levels of biodiversity loss globally. It also shows that there is a way to turn the tide, so to speak, or to bend the curve, as the report mentions it, because biodiversity loss, with that loss, it is possible to go towards a new normal for biodiversity, where we don't just preserve, but also enhance natural capital. So there is really a way up, and that's what you see here, bending this curve in the graph that is used in the report as well. So this is also where nature-based solutions come in. And we've been working with leading NGOs on water replenishment in Europe for more than 10 years now. We've reached great results both in Europe and globally, replenishing, so giving back the direct water that we use as a Coca-Cola company in our direct operations. And we know that you can work through nature-based solutions to not only give back that volume, but also help nature restore and rebalance, and work on other economic factors, so to speak. Think about ecotourism or better yields of crops. We'll come back to that a little bit later, because we will take you through some of the projects that we've done in Europe and the natural capital assessment. So over time, we have seen that these benefits from these water replenishment projects are not just about restoring water. It is also really what you can do in a broader sense with the support of ecosystem services, and that we all benefit from it, nature benefits from it, and the planet benefits from it. Two more things I want to highlight before we go a little bit deeper, and that is that policymakers are really taking notice of biodiversity. It's very connected to the EU Green Deal, and we've seen specific events also being organized around it. So the Convention on Biological Diversity in 2021, this was set for last year actually, but because of the pandemic, it was postponed. Last year was going to be the biodiversity super year. Some NGOs also talked about it, but actually I think a lot of it has moved, and rightfully so, to this year's agenda. So end of May, we will have a specific gathering around that. And of course, also in December, when we have the COP26, biodiversity will be an important talking point and connection point. So I think for those of you who haven't got that on your radar, it's important to also know that these big events are coming up. And as said, it's also very linked to the EU Green Deal. So the EU Biodiversity Strategy is already out. In there, for example, there is a very clear goal to have concrete guidance for the financial sector on what business and activities can positively contribute to the EU biodiversity goals. So in some way, there is already a link to the sustainable finance guidelines for contributing to the EU climate goals. So, and we're absolutely convinced that this will shape further. We've also talked to commissioners a couple of weeks ago. We had a great session, and we just really also heard from the European Commission that this is on their radar, and it's a topic that they will further build out, and expect both civil society but also a private sector to step forward and come and join. So thinking in the financial sector will really shape the rest of the market, and it will impact us all. And so therefore wanting to end with two other important elements linking into the financial sector and to investors as well. And it's the science-based targets for nature and task force for nature related financial disclosures, a mouthful. And this is not, so this is really to show you that it's not only NGOs and policymakers that are ringing the bell. There is also really a market actually thinking about biodiversity and preparing for these bigger targets that are coming. So the big things that are coming are the science-based targets for nature. As I just said, we're expecting them end 2022, and the task force for nature-based financial disclosures is expected by Q2 of 2023. So we know that's coming up pretty soon, and so we only have basically 1 or 2 years to get ready, and we have to prepare to meet those requirements, of course. And so just as a perspective, nobody forced, for example, companies to do science-based targets for climate or to do the TCFD reporting. But we know now that this has almost become the standard, right? And companies like the Coca-Cola Company and many others in our industry, we all work with these requirements. So with science-based targets and all kind of disclosure measures. So, and we really think this is going to impact, so the developments as just described are going to impact how we as business and interactions with other partners are going to look at biodiversity and further disclose this, which again is a great thing if you look at the urgency of the planet and the urgency of the climate change crisis that we have. So yes, the market is ready and it's maturing really around biodiversity issues. Now the question is, how can you really work with it? And this is where I think we can segue into sharing a little bit how we've done it for Coca-Cola and how it's linked to our strategy. So we as a Coca-Cola company, we have many sustainability goals at global level and then trickled down into the European level, for example. And water is absolutely one of those global goals. We actually presented our renewed water strategy yesterday on World Water Day. And what it essentially says is that we want to achieve water security for our business, our communities, and the nature where we operate, where we source ingredients, and where we touch people's lives. And so really understanding what water security means, it is about availability, it's about quality, it's about access, resilience, also linked into climate and climate change, and governance. So these elements, they all matter and they need to work together and they need to come together. And we as a company have said we also really want to play a key leading role because we know we can do that. We can and have to make a positive change in the markets and the communities where we operate. And we know that based on our previous water stewardship strategy, we can do it. We met our targets, we replenished our operations and the communities where we were part of with more than 160% globally, more than 212% in Europe. So we know we can play a leading role here. So this is really about reducing the water we use, recycle the water within our bottling plants. It's about enhancing community resilience. It's about improving watershed health. And we are very clear that it's not only us, but it's nature, it's communities, it's other businesses benefiting from that, and that's the only way forward. Now, if we really want to understand what that means also in the intersection of climate change and biodiversity and other topics like deforestation, we wanted to understand what the work that we've already done in Europe had delivered when you look at those nature-based solutions and therefore the natural capital. So Ivan is going to share a little bit the specific work we've done in this space. But what I wanted you to know today is that we've really anchored this into our wider strategy. So this wasn't a one-off. It comes from a global ambition and then a European ambition to make sure we use water in a very responsible way, because we know it is a shared resource and it's a shared value that we all need and can advocate for. So over to you, Ivan.
Thank you, Therese. Thank you. Okay, back. And now let me just walk you through what we've actually done. Therese mentioned this is about natural capital benefits, and it's about the natural capital benefits of restoring water, or the natural capital benefits of nature-based solutions. One of the key things that Coca-Cola does to restore all this water back into the environment is a huge replenishment program, which is mostly anchored around nature restoration, but also community water access all over the world with some of the leading, both local and international NGOs. What we did is we developed a method to try to figure out, okay, how can we actually measure those benefits apart from just restoring the water, which is your sort of meter cubes indicator? What else is there and how do we actually measure it? Under the hood, we were following the natural capital protocol throughout the way. This is sort of our project process, and I'll just show you bit by bit, and we'll explain what we've done and show you how it works in practice, okay? Starting with materiality is actually deciding on what you want to measure. As the natural capital protocol advises, you can't measure everything, but you should measure at least what matters. Long story short, we did a sort of three-pronged approach. Our Coca-Cola's project partners, they report in something called project data sheets, and there are these succinct documents where they explain what they've done. We took that, we saw what sort of projects do they do and what do they think is important, and these are the people on the ground, so they know best what they did and they know best the benefits that they delivered. And then we kind of double check that against some quantitative data, so there are sort of global estimates of what ecosystem services are most valuable, or at least important, in the sense that what's the biggest number there, and that just gives us another data point to work with to figure out, okay, how do we balance what we want to measure, and also literature review just to kind of make sure we're not missing anything, and to be able to really say, okay, our scope is solid, it's reasonable, and we're not actually missing something important that we should be measuring. Before I actually show you what we decided is important, we picked 7 ecosystem services, 7 benefits of nature-based solutions that come out the most often for water replenishment projects. I'd actually be really interested to know what you think. What are the 7 most important things that you would say are something that usually tends to come out of water restoration projects, nature restoration, nature-based solutions? I'll start the voting session now, and again, you just need to click a sticky note. You can pick 7, you can pick less. Yeah, just kind of click on the sticky notes and let's see what you think, and then we will review the truth, so to speak, and we'll show you what we decided. All right, I'll give you 2-3 minutes for this, if you don't mind. All right, I see people are already voting. What I'll actually do is I'll show you the cursors. Actually, I'm not sure if you can see the cursors right now, but anyway. All right, people are happily voting, good. And you won't be able to see this, but as I said, I have some superpowers, being the mural owner, so I can see some things that you can't. And as well, in the end, I'd be keen to hear feedback, not just on the session, but also on the platform and on how you thought this sort of event went. We do want to keep it, more interactive, less formal, give you the opportunity to ask questions along the way. And in the later sort of slides, I'll be releasing you so that you can add sticky notes and add questions and ask us. And of course, you can also, if you struggle with that, just kind of you can do it on the GoToWebinar platform and have a colleague monitoring that, and she'll take those questions and she'll either add them as we go along, or she'll put them in the end and we can address them. So, you know, anything you want to know, you will have addressed, okay? Give you 10 more seconds, shall we say? All right, and I will, let's see, is anybody voting yet? No, I think most people are done. Let's stop the voting. And now again, you should close the black window, and we can go back to the platform where we can see what people voted on. Okay, and you will see biodiversity, most important, water quality, water quantity, and then we have a mixed bag. We have air quality, recreation, local climate regulation, which is, you know, urban heat islands, this sort of thing, flood protection, erosion, carbon. Oh, I actually have erosion twice. Anyway, all right. I think you are mostly where we are with one or two outliers, and I'll show you now what we actually figured out, and we can move on to the next part, which is method development and our approach. And these are the seven we had: water quantity, water quality, floods, flood protection, carbon sequestration, recreation and educational benefits, food and raw materials, and biodiversity. These are the ones we found most often occur in water replenishment projects for the Coca-Cola Company and for the sort of projects we had in Europe, at least where we piloted this, but as well based on our literature review and based on our additional assessment, this should more or less be applicable globally, though we are thinking about, if necessary, expanding this with other methods if need be. Okay, I'll very quickly tell you about the methodologies we've actually developed to measure the monetary value of these benefits. And for water quantity, we do market pricing, but taking into account water scarcity. And what we found based on some independent review and based on sensitivity analysis, that's a good enough solution. It's simple, it's easy enough, but it gives you the same sort of result, or at least a similar result compared to other more complicated methodologies. For water quality, we do the avoided costs of treating polluted water, which again is quite reasonable. We don't do, for example, the human health impacts of water pollution, and it doesn't really affect the results much, because the sort of pollutants that at least the sort of project that Coca-Cola tends to do, you can treat, and that's mostly nitrogen runoff, phosphorus runoff, the sort of things that come out of farms. It's not that those don't have that big of an impact on human health, at least not directly. So it's not something that really influences the results much. For floods, it's about damage to infrastructure. That's quite intuitive. We don't take into account right now the impacts on human health, for example, from flooding, and those actually can have a substantial value. They're just more difficult to measure. And for us, we wanted to keep the methodology in a way that it works in sort of any part of the world. And Coca-Cola does work in places you wouldn't expect. I mean, Belarus, Bulgaria, Latin America, all sorts of places where data isn't that easy to come by. So you need a method that you can use that can measure things, and can measure things in a way that's consistent and easy enough without needing a PhD to figure it out. Then for carbon, it's IPCC. Well, you can't do anything else. The IPCC is the standard. And for the sort of complexity, and it's not really complex, the IPCC so-called tier 1 method, it's a pretty good ballpark estimate. Recreation is really where we mostly focus on spending, but actually there's all sorts of intangible benefits of recreation to do with aesthetics, to do with subjective value, natural beauty, cultural significance. There we don't include those because to make things easy, but actually those can have a substantial benefit. And actually in some places, for example, if you're from the UK, you're already privileged, I'd say, because you have all sorts of ready-made tools that you can use to assess this. The question is, again, how do we make sure that other people can assess this when they don't have such tools? And then food and raw materials is the sort of benefits farmers get from savings and from water savings, from electricity savings, etc. And finally, there's biodiversity. And for biodiversity, what we did is we tried to measure this quantitatively, to value it. And to be fair, the results we got were quite substantial. But the problem was really they were not credible in the sense that they were very difficult to actually substantiate, because they were just so all over the place in terms of the results you get. So really what we decided is, okay, biodiversity is something that we need to do better. And what we're really thinking about is you don't need to measure everything in monetary terms. You need to value everything, because actually for some things, there's a lot of work that you need to do beforehand in order to actually be able to measure the thing you want to value. And for biodiversity, we're already thinking about potential indicators to include in a standardized way for all water replenishment projects in Coca-Cola, which are 200 something all over the world, 250, I think, or even more. So you can imagine the sort of managerial challenge you have. You want to be able to both measure something, do it in a reasonably simple way, or at least a way that doesn't take overly big amount of time. But then you also want it to be consistent enough so that you can actually compare and contrast and figure out what works and what doesn't. So we're already thinking about indicators to do with quantity and quality of habitats, state of species, red list species, protected species, etc., etc. And just noting that really this is where the natural capital community and biodiversity community is right now in terms of the level of detail that we need. That's why we have guidances coming out of the Capitals Coalition, for example, about actually measuring biodiversity before we actually do any monetary valuation. Yeah, really the point I'm making is if you want to value something and want to figure out what the benefit is, you first need to measure that thing properly. And for biodiversity, there's work to be done in order to be able to do that in a consistent way that actually makes sense. All right, and then there's also other indicators that show up less often, but they can still be important. So we allow for that. So the sort of guidance we've developed also has guidance on how to actually measure these, or at least how to put them on a qualitative scale and provide that context to whomever will be reviewing these projects, because this is all decision relevant information. And actually with these sorts of natural capital assessments, rarely can you actually measure everything in a quantitative way, and rarely can you put a euro number and everything and just kind of say, okay, that's it, that's my project ready. So we need to allow for that qualitative information to shine through. Otherwise, we actually risk making some wrong decisions, and we'll show you that in a second with some examples. Okay, and moving on from methods to data collection. And data collection really is just what I want to show you as we develop some data collection tools, basically some Excel sheets. The idea is we don't want these to be too complicated. In the same way as the methods, we want to be easy enough that a non-specialist can use, but they're still robust enough that you get some reasonable results. We have the Excel sheets, they're ready, they're there. Yeah, they're just ready to use. And actually, it takes about, I'd say, 1 or 2 days to grapple with the Excel sheets to get the data there. And then you can run through the methods, and if you're just starting, it'll take you probably a week. But a week of work for a replenishment project or a nature restoration project that costs, I don't know, 100,000 euro really is nothing. So that's sort of the level of effort we want to do, something that's simple enough, but also robust enough. Okay. And in order to be able to make sure that though this methodology that we have works and is actually up to par, we had 2 independent reviewers come in and comment on it and also give suggestions. And we had 2 gentlemen from Sustained Value, Mr. James Spurgeon. James is one of the authors of the Natural Capital Protocol. We're really very pleased to be able to work with him. And the other one is Ian Dickey from MedTech. Ian is one of the leading environmental economists in the UK right now. So I think actually some of Ian's colleagues are on the line. Maybe you should ask them about this if you're interested. So both we went through it in 2 rounds of review. They noted on the strengths of the methods, some issues that they may have. And then we worked on addressing those and incorporating their feedback in order to be able to make sure that actually what we have is up to par and makes sense and is based on sound science and actually achieves the purpose it sets out to achieve. I won't walk you through the entire text because what the end result is actually we've developed 2 reports. One is a sort of summary report, which is now available, and in the end you have a link that you can follow and you can read all about it. And there's also a more detailed methodological sort of guideline, which is meant to be used by people who actually want to assess projects on the ground. And it walks you through the methods, the data needs, the calculations, etc. So both are ready. And what we want to do now is kind of to show you how it works and to give you a feel for what they do, okay? And without further ado, I will skip to that. And that is here, methodology in action. What I'll do now is I will release you. You'll still be able to follow me, but I will allow you also, if you have any questions, just to add some sticky notes. Again, you just double click, you'll be able to add sticky notes, you can add questions. If it's something simple enough, we can address that immediately, or if not, well, one of my colleagues will take that and she'll kind of take it to the end and we can address it later, okay? And if you don't want to follow what I'm doing, you can just release yourself and there'll be a button for that. All right, this is the results, the summary results. What we found basically is on the x-axis, we have investment. On the y-axis, you have the value of the ecosystem services for a project that persists for 10 years. And this dotted line here is the break-even line. So what you'll see actually is most projects break even and actually quite handsomely. In order to for a project to be counted for 10 years, actually to say we have 10 years of annual ecosystem service benefits, what Coke do is there is an auditing process every year, so that the results that are actually released publicly and for water replenishment, they undergo independent auditing. I think it's Ernst & Young that does this in the US, centrally for all the projects throughout the world. So for a project to be counted for 10 years, it needs to be audited. So you need to be able to prove that actually these benefits are still occurring. So it's not a one-off and then, yeah, we kind of assume it happens for 10 years. This is double-checked throughout time. And here, if these projects are all retrospective, and most of those have actually been around for quite a while. So seeing their results here shows you that most of those break even. Most of those actually follow this sort of line where the bigger the investment, the bigger the benefit, which, to be fair, may seem intuitive, but actually really isn't, at least wasn't for us. And actually finding this was interesting. And there's also some outliers that you will see here. There are some projects that for a reasonably modest investment, you get a hugely disproportionate return. And there's also some projects that don't necessarily pay back for themselves in ecosystem service terms. So they have benefits that don't, even after 10 years, sort of capture the original investment. Point I'll make here is that actually this tends to happen because you can't measure everything quantitatively. And we'll show you this in a second. We'll follow these arrows here. But first, I'll take control again. And we'll go through example number 1, which is this project in Belarus. And I'll also show you how one of the methodologies works, just to give you a taste, okay? Again, we're here releasing everyone so that you can add questions, but also doing it like this so that you can release yourself. You can move around if you'd like freely, but you can also follow me if you don't. This is a project called Let's Save Ionia Together. What the hell is Ionia? Yeah, well, Ionia is the 5th largest bog in Europe. It is in Belarus. It's a sort of thing that is big enough to see from space. You know, if you kind of zoom out on Google Maps, you see a large green spot. That is Ionia. It is the 5th largest peat bog in Europe. It is a designated nature reserve, important bird area, Ramsar territory. I mean, you name it. It is hugely significant. But the problem is, back in the 19th century, it was drained due to irrigation. Obviously, the peat dried out. There were some huge annual forest fires. The biodiversity significantly deteriorated, obviously, which was not the best sort of situation where this nature reserve could be in. What happened then is Coca-Cola, working together with APB BirdLife, so with their local branch in Belarus, along with some volunteers, basically what they did is they went and dammed the irrigation canals with most of the material that was already there. So the fallen trees, the detritus, this sort of thing. Damming the canals, what led to over the next 2, 3, 4 years, 1 meter rise in the water table across 14,000 hectares, so huge area, which significantly reduced peat fires, which A, they don't no longer happen every year, and B, they're much smaller in terms of size. Today, Ionia is a world-class nature reserve and a world-class tourist destination. If you even just Google Ionia nature trips or something, you'll see the sort of hipster marketing you get for other nature reserves, you know, camping and glamping, kayaks, wildlife watching, all this sort of stuff. It's actually really cool. I'm actually really keen to go. Maybe, you know, one day when we're actually allowed to do these things again, I'll be able to. But yeah, the change was quite substantial. And what the point I want to make here is to the right, for those of you who aren't following me right now, tell you how the carbon benefits work, because those were the biggest ones. It is a huge peat bog after all. And to kind of show you first the sort of results that you can get with the method, and also to talk about how the carbon methodology works, to give you a feel for how these things work in general. Yeah, I'll start from the back and move forward. You see first this graphic here. The graphic tells you what the size of the value of ecosystem services is for the different types of ecosystem services that we're measuring. And you will notice the carbon benefits are huge, hugely disproportional compared to everything else here. It's not to say that the other ones aren't important. It's just that comparatively, carbon was bigger here. Yeah, it's actually the carbon content of the peat and the carbon sequestration potential of the peat was actually quite small. But because it was spread over such a huge area, 14,000 hectares, you get this huge benefit. And actually, we double-checked these numbers with some in-depth results from some very in-depth measurements that were done by the Belarusian Academy of Sciences. And actually, those agree quite well. So we're confident in this result. And what this can tell you is cool information like, okay, you invested, in this case, 0.3 million euro. And actually, in 1 year, you get over €1 million of ecosystem services. So this project pays back for itself in about 4 months, which is quite, I'd say, quite eye-opening managerial information. Yeah, if you go and tell your manager, I restore the peat bog, and you want more money for restoring another one, maybe they'll tell you, go work somewhere else because it's not what we do. But if you tell them, I actually had this much benefits for the local community and for society as a whole, then when you're talking in euros and you're talking in paybacks, suddenly things click, and then you can actually start talking to people that don't usually speak nature protection language in a language that they actually understand, which is monetary value. Yeah. And what we do for measuring this carbon, you see here we have this equation. It's very simple. It's just very basic arithmetic. Basically, the area that's now re-wetted, it's the peat that is now underwater, in this case 14,000 hectares. And then you have some emissions factors in the same way as you would do for a corporate greenhouse gas inventory, just some numbers that you multiply by for the state of the wetland before. So this is, or actually this is after the state of the wetland once you actually cover it with water. and then you need to subtract the emissions that were there before. So the emissions from the wetland when it was drained, because that still had some carbon sequestration before. That's your baseline. You need to subtract it. What these EFG, ABCDs are the different types of emission factors. All you need to really worry about is, or you don't even need to worry about this, you just need to know. They come from the IPCC. There are these categories that they have there for wetlands, and how you choose which factors to use. You just need some very, very basic information. You need to know, okay, what's my type of land use? Is it a forest, a grassland? Is it a mangrove? Whatever. Is it a shallow or deep drained wetland? And the soil, is it a nutrient rich or a nutrient poor soil? And that's it. And this is sort of very basic information that any nature protection project can very easily gather without too much extra effort. Because remember, what project partners for Coke need to do is they actually need to be restoring this nature protection area, right? Their main job isn't to be measuring the ecosystem services. So we can't give them a method that demands they spend half their time on calculating the ecosystem service benefits when they actually have some real nature restoration to do. Hence why we want something reasonably simple. But once you do this, you multiply by carbon price. We use one from the World Bank, which I'd say is actually reasonably low. But again, keeping things in a reasonable, comparable manner. But again, when you do sensitivity analysis, you can play around with a different carbon price, higher, lower, and see how that influences the results. And we've done this, not showing it here, but you can read all about it in the report we have. You get the result in the end. And yeah, you can then actually compare things, and you can say, okay, my carbon is important here. And actually, if you compare whatever amount of carbon this is in CO2 units and divide by the investment, it turns out it's so much more cheaper than actually some other carbon reduction measures that a business could potentially do. So immediately now you can make a business case. Okay, I will stop just for a second here and see if anybody has any questions on this, or shall we move on? Adding some sticky notes here, as you see on top, in case anybody wants to add something. If not, we can take it to the end, okay? No? Fine, no problem. I'll take control again, just so I can take you to the other part of the mural and make sure nobody gets lost. We have our other project, the one that didn't really pay back for itself. Yeah? This Ionia project, it was huge. It was such a massive success, but then why does this one in Malta seem to be so disappointing? It doesn't pay back for itself even after 10 years. So what gives? Following our arrow here, and we end up in Malta, and this is a project which was done with GWP Med, the Global Water Partnership in the Mediterranean. What you need to know for context is Malta is hugely water stressed. Based on some common tools, it has the highest possible water stress score out of any score that you can get. So, well, it's an island in the Mediterranean. There's not much water to go around. What the project did was it was all about non-conventional water resource management, mostly focused on public buildings, schools, but also stadiums, pools, etc. And they installed these non-conventional water resource systems, so rainwater harvesting, gray water recycling, in this case, this is a stadium for watering the stadium, this sort of thing, for toilet flushing, etc. But also it had a huge stakeholder outreach component, stakeholder engagement, all the way from everyday citizens, everyday Maltese citizens, to the top, to the very highest levels of the Maltese government, lobbying for non-conventional water resources in public policy, and as well disseminating in all sorts of international fora. World Water Day, which was yesterday, Stockholm World Water Week, and such. Yeah. And now, just to see what we've done again, this project ended up looking like this. There wasn't this data readily available that was gathered for carbon and food and raw materials, and here it's all about energy savings. There wasn't any data gathered on the energy savings because when you have these passive systems that will gather the water and filter it for you, you don't actually need to pay the water company to pump the water. So that's some energy savings already there. But that's not even that significant anyway. The water benefits, the water quantity benefits were big here, but they still weren't big enough to actually pay back the project. The project actually had a sort of payback time in terms of the ecosystem service benefits of about 30 years, which intuitively, or well, not necessarily intuitively, but just looking at this information, you may think, that's dismal. You know, why did we do this anyway? In a second, I'll show you why this isn't really the whole point, and actually we're not measuring what we should be measuring here. But first, just to give you a feeling for one of the other methodologies that we have, and this is for the benefits of water quantity. So this is only using the water, the cubic meters for productive use. It's not about the quality of the water, which is a separate measurement that we do. It's only about the actual physical volume of water and what you do with it, okay? Again, it's just some very simple arithmetic. Basically, it's the amount of water that you replenish, or in this case, the water you save, the water and the gray water that you have, and that this you measure by definition. Then it's how much water is abstracted in the catchment. And this usually tends to come from national statistics. You can easily find the river basin level here in Europe, for example, or you can indeed find it even in the World Bank statistics for the country as a whole. Though it's better to use some local numbers actually, or you can just ask the local water company. Usually they provide this sort of information. Then we want to account for water stress, and this is important because the value of water, or not the value of water, rather the price of water, the price you pay to the water company, typically has nothing to do with the actual value of water for people or for nature. It only has to do with the water company paying some money to pump it out of the ground and put it into your tap. So it has nothing to do with water scarcity. It has nothing to do with who uses the water, which is why here we account for this water scarcity using the WRI aqueduct, which has which provides numbers for baseline water stress for river basins for every part of the globe. It's a very well established tool. Coca-Cola uses this all the time, and so do a lot of other companies. Accounting for water stress here inflates this value, so makes the value of the water bigger, especially in a place like Malta. And then it's just about who uses the water and what's the price. So these numbers here are the shares of usage. So we distinguish between agriculture, industry, and domestic purposes, and then it's the price. And because this pricing information isn't necessarily reflecting the true value of water, is the water stress adjustment that really tries to account for that and inflate this number. Oh, excuse me. What we've seen from our sensitivity testing is this works well enough, especially in places where there's high water scarcity. This gives you a very comparable number. And we have quite a detailed analysis of this that you can read all about in the actual methodological document. So I won't bore you much with this. I'll just skip to why this project actually should be looked at, not just in terms of these numbers that we got, but actually in terms of the wider benefits it has. And again, this is bringing it back to the qualitative information. Yeah, monetary valuation isn't everything, and we need to recognize that we can't value everything. We can't put everything in monetary figures, or at least we're not providing for it yet. But actually, for some things, they're so intangible. You can probably find a way to value it, but does it make sense really? Is it worth the effort? Especially for things like capacity building, which here was a huge component of this project. I mean, this project developed some interactive educational resources that were, initially they planned to roll these out to 100 teachers throughout the country. In the end, they reached 1,400, so 14 times the original plan. And Malta's not that big of a country, so 1,400 teachers is quite substantial. They reached nearly 18,000 students with these interactive water management and water resource lessons. It was a huge wider public outreach campaign to the Maltese public, and then this was a project that was very much used as a best practice example for developing the actual Maltese water strategy, which was developed at the time. So this project, through its lobbying and through the best practice that it showed, actually influenced the way that the Maltese government decides to manage water issues in the future. and it was quite instrumental in actually getting that non-conventional water resource component into the Maltese water strategy. And as well, wider public outreach, as I said, international fora, World Water Day, World Water Week, local events, Mediterranean-wide events, European events, you name it. No, this project had a very big sort of bang in the public sphere. And hopefully this convinces you that, you know, monetary valuation is important, but the qualitative information also needs to be taken into account. You need to properly document this, and you need to show it to the decision makers, because actually otherwise, if you just rely on the numbers, they are useful, they make the business case, but occasionally the business case is wider, and you need to be able to account for that. Okay, which brings us back to our picture here. And again, we should take these results with a sort of grain of salt, or at least we should use these pictures to show what we achieve and compare different projects, but we shouldn't over rely on just these numbers, because they are not everything. Actually, I see some questions coming up here. Interesting. Let's see. Oh, excuse me. Is the financial value of reputational benefit that Coca-Cola realizes by supporting such nature-based initiatives? Oh, is there a financial value of the reputational benefit? Therese, would you like me to answer for you?
No, let me go first, and then you can supplement. So, from a methodology point of view, no, we're not calculating that, and it's not directly linked to the nature-based solutions, right? But is there an element where it is good for us as a company to show that we are working through this space and we are able to share what we are doing through an established way of calculating those nature-based solutions? Well, yes, of course. But this whole initiative and all our water work isn't driven by reputational targets. It is driven by environmental targets linked also to our business operations and where we see risks that we need to cover. So yeah, of course, with anything you do, if you make a positive difference and if you do have a contribution, or when you see opportunities like enhancing biodiversity, that is a good thing, but it is not something through this exercise as such that has driven us. Hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you. All right, and we have here, were you able to analyze the actual money value that was realized by the community, the company, and the authorities? What I can say is yes, in part. Some of the benefits here, for example, what we call food and raw materials, when the methodology we have, especially when it comes to farmers, is purely based on costs and benefits. So the farmer will save some costs for water, for fertilizers, maybe for water, fertilizers, energy, yeah, and also maybe what we found actually for one of the projects is because the water is managed in a more efficient way, in a way that is actually better for the crops, you can actually have some higher yields. So the farmer may actually realize a bit of extra profit there as well. And once you take the costs and you subtract the benefits, you can actually see what the farmer actually really got in their pocket. For some of the other benefits, for example, the water quality, the flood protection, that's numbers that do actually reflect the costs that somebody would need to pay. For example, the water quality benefits are about avoided costs of wastewater treatment. There, the challenge is actually figuring out who exactly. It's not the point of the methodology to say it's company number one that saved whatever amount of euro, but no, at least you can use the number as a case and say, actually, you know, because we built this nature protection area here or whatever, and it's filtering the water, that's cost that actually would need to be paid by somebody else. And actually, for the sort of pollution that you treat with nature restoration projects usually, and that tends to be agricultural runoff, there the water companies can't treat that anyway. I mean, that's so-called diffuse pollution. It's very low concentration. No, water companies tend to treat the point sources, the pollution that is in high concentrations, and then you have the nitrogen, the phosphorus, and the water is left over. And actually there, if you weren't to invest in this nature protection or in this nature restoration area, actually you need to probably build some other sort of nature-based solution or constructed wetland in order to treat for that. So we actually account for that there. And for the floods as well, that's damage to infrastructure. So that is immediately a number that is very much well, linked to what the authorities do, what business do. So it's something that you can use to actually make the economic case for investing in this sort of nature-based solution. Okay, I'll quickly zoom out to see if there's some other questions that have popped out. No. I will now again summon you so we can move to the next bit. And the next bit actually is going forward. I mean, we've done this methodology, but okay, so what? Well, it's not the end. No, it's just the beginning. Right now, what we're already discussing is we want to test more. We've done 7 projects in Europe, which is about 33%, so 1/3 of all the projects that Coca-Cola have in Europe. But we want to test it outside Europe as well. We're already talking to some people in Latin America, for example. Excuse me, cough. Yeah, we're already talking to some people in Latin America, for example, for testing there. We are in some discussions with folks from the US, in particular, some people from the CEO Water Mandate, who together with Coca-Cola are working on a separate initiative on the other side of the pond called Benefit Accounting for Nature-Based Solutions for Watersheds. Again, it's about measuring the ecosystem service benefits of nature-based solutions in a consistent way, and we want to feed into that. And if necessarily, we'd like to add new methodologies where necessary, where it makes sense. For example, for erosion control, if this is something that is a material for enough projects, and probably it will be if in the future Coke, for example, decides to move more toward afforestation, forest projects. Yes, as well, if you start thinking about more urban projects, there you may have some additional methods there that you may want to account for. Biodiversity, as I said, huge, and it makes sense to measure it, makes sense to manage it. You just need to work on actually being able to measure the actual biodiversity benefits in a way that is comparable, in a way that is decision relevant, and the way that you can actually make sure that A, you're doing it properly, and B, you can actually compare what you do in different locations all over the world. All right. And we want to bundle the methodology with a sort of toolkit. So Excel sheets ready to use. You just you go in, you follow the steps, you put in your numbers, and you get a result in the end. Again, kind of keeping the entry level very low. So you don't need 2 PhDs just to get started. You don't need to be a natural capital expert. You just need to be somebody who understands the local context and really wants to maybe learn a small bit, but then get some decision relevant results. Okay, and continue the discussion, which brings me to the last bit here. I'm taking control and rudely interrupting whatever you were doing on my mural and going to the next bit. And Therese, I'll hand over to you if you don't mind.
No, sure. So let me wrap it up from our behalf. As Ivan said, for us as well, this is really the beginning. It's not the end point. This was for us an exploration to understand better, retrospectively, what the benefits were of the water replenishment work that we did in Europe. So as you've seen, we've taken 7 very different projects, and we've taken them through the methodology as Ivan explained. And with that, it helped us to get better and deeper understanding of the benefits and of those ecosystem services delivered and what those values are. And part of those values, as Ivan explained, you can monetize them, and part of them you can't. That's also an interesting learning and insight for us again, going back to our wider sustainability strategy, where there are environmental elements, but also social elements. And more than ever before, we are seeing that those things come together. So as said, this is for us a starting point. It has given us deeper understanding, better knowledge, and better opportunities to anchor our work and link it to some of the developments that we talked about before, whether it's the EU Green Deal or the TCFD disclosures. So it's been really helpful. And also it's going to help us have further conversations with our communities, with local society, but also with policymakers and other companies that might be sourcing from the same watershed or are sourcing from the same region, for example, with the ingredients. So it is helping us to go back to that piece of leadership where we also want to have the conversation about the shared resource of water and the shared opportunity we see. So for us, this will be something that we will continue to work on, both in Europe and outside of Europe. It is something where we are keen to learn and hear your feedback. So that was also why today's session was really important for us to share it with you and welcome any inputs, questions, feedback, and for you to start working with it. And the more people work around this topic, and it's a relatively new, fresh topic, the better it is, because we can come to better insights, better methodologies, and more robust data to use moving forward. So really, this is an invite from us to you to come back to us with other learnings, insights, remarks, so that we can all kind of continue to work in this space. Because if there's one thing that has become even clearer through this work for us, is that this really is a pathway towards the future. So good luck, and I hope this session was helpful for you and open to any questions or points of feedback. You're on mute, Ivan.
Yes, I am. I'll summon you for the final time is what I was saying, just so I can move you here on the QA part in case you miss it. And I'll release you again and you can fill in whatever we want, but we'd be happy to have your questions. We have 20 minutes still on the agenda, and we've deliberately left it this way so that we can have a discussion in case anybody wants to say anything. You either double click to add a sticky note or just click on one and you write whatever you want. And if somebody deletes them again, well, you know, we'll just add new ones. Okay. I will take your stunned silence for just a moment of reflection.
Well, maybe otherwise, Ivan, while people are thinking about this, could you give an example of the social impact? Because we talked about it, and it was also more part of one of the projects that you shared, but it was also one of the points of feedback from the external reviewers. So as we are seeing the social and the environmental sustainability agenda come closer together now more than ever, any thoughts from you on the social impact of the nature-based solutions?
Well, I mean, especially I think once we move more in the urban environment as well, as was with that project, and as well we've had other projects we've assessed, for example, in London, it becomes more important just because, I mean, that's where people live. As in the capacity building, that's something that permeates throughout, you know, everything. You know, having the Maltese government take up something based on your suggestion is hugely impactful, but you can't really put a real number value on it. I don't think it makes sense as well, but it makes sense to write that down, to account for it, and to show your managers that it happened. But also, for example, we've now talked with some of colleagues in Latin America, for example, where a lot of their water replenishment and water access projects are to do also with gender issues, and with upskilling women, with also, you know, accounting for things like honest pay, maternity leave, all these sorts of things that, you know, we take for granted here in Europe, but don't necessarily happen all over the globe. There, it makes sense to also, for example, put a value on that. and to account and to have a proper methodology in place, because in that context, that's material and that's important. So I'm sure these issues will crop up more and more once we test in other places and once we talk to other people. We always just need to make sure that we're using the sound science and we're actually putting the proper numbers there. And if we can't, we should be honest, as we've tried to be so far, and where the limitations are. And we should always try to be transparent. All right. Can Coca-Cola or Denkstatt share any compelling arguments you've made to Coca-Cola colleagues or governments on why assessing the value and taking time was ultimately a good investment? Therese, we've had quite a few discussions with your colleagues already.
Yeah, true. Well, let me first share from my side, and then maybe you can also share from your experience in some of those conversations that you've been having, Ivan. So one of the compelling arguments was to better understand what additional value we bring based on these projects. As I tried to explain, our water strategy was very much linked to a water replenishment target. So replenishing the amount of water that we use in our direct operations. And that's a very important target and measure. But we also knew, by working with partners to restore nature, we knew we were doing so much more. But what is that? And how can you talk about that in a very compelling, transparent, good way that is accepted and replicable around the globe? So that was one of the reasons for us to just get better understanding and connect our work in the water area really with all these developments that I described at the start. And I have to say that was compelling enough. People really understood that and thought it was interesting for us to kind of deep dive in that. Ivan?
And what I can actually tell you about some really interesting discussions that we've had, both when presenting this with Coca-Cola and also externally now in a few events. In particular, for example, the carbon that you saw, the carbon benefits from nature restoration. As you know, companies all over the world are thinking about science-based targets for carbon, decarbonization, zero carbon, Paris Agreement. You know, it's on the agenda. It's really hot. It's really topical. Especially if you're a market leader like Coca-Cola, it's basically something that is a requirement now. You need to do it. And showing those carbon benefits of water restoration projects. And remember, Coke has been doing this for years purely as a water restoration led exercise. So the key indicator is just the water. Showing the carbon benefits there as well immediately got people thinking, but actually we're already doing this and it's actually so successful. We love this program. Can't we start thinking about the carbon benefits as well? And then move it into our supply chain more, use this to engage people in the supply chain, to engage communities more. Immediately, the nature-based solution thinking starts to emerge. And this will be a huge discussion going forward for all companies when you start thinking about science-based targets, because the fact is, most companies, or at least some companies, won't be able to decarbonize everything. There will be some residual emissions there, and those will have to be taken up by nature restoration measures, for afforestation, forest protection, wetland restoration, whatever. And the science-based targets right now with the greenhouse gas protocol is developing these methodologies. They're thinking really hard about how to include them and how to help companies actually measure this stuff. And then, having this and having the nature-based solutions thinking then actually allows you to take these nature restoration projects and make them something that actually is directly linked to your activities, to your supply chain, to the locations you actually work in, as opposed to, buying a certificate to protect a forest on the other side of the world, which has nothing to do with your business. Obviously, one of these things is better, which is why I'm really interested in following up this, and communicating the stuff more and what we've done more, because I've seen that people are really keen, and actually this way we're really starting to think about nature as solutions to the problems that we have in the business context. And the business context is key because somebody needs to pay for this, right? The financial sector engaging them will build the market, and then this will permeate to everybody else, and companies can actually make the proper case and can actually use this in their own activities.
Yeah, so two things to build on that, and you said it, but I just want to make sure people are clear on it. You can only account for that carbon sequestration if it's directly linked into your operations or your sourcing region. So and so therefore it can be absolutely an argument and very helpful to see the interconnection between water and climate there, and so the carbon and decarbonization agenda. But I also want to flag here a valid point that recently one of our partner organizations mentioned to us, that yes, decarbonization is very important, but it is not the holy grail. We also know that we need to restore nature, and therefore, for example, need to restore biodiversity. And going back to that curve that WWF also presented, that is really something that we should take in mind, and decarbonization can absolutely be part of that, but it is not the holy grail. But it can be helpful to really make the case and show the benefits and how nature can come in as a solution for your climate strategy, for your water strategy, for your sustainable agriculture strategy. So that's really helpful.
I actually have a comment here from one of my colleagues. If you're not aware of BirdLife's TESSA tool, TESSA is spelled like this. It's already a tool by BirdLife that is about simple assessments of ecosystem services. And actually, we did look at TESSA, and some of the methodologies we have are sort of inspired by this, particularly for recreation and for farmers. But what we found is they weren't necessarily all applicable in the Coca-Cola context and in what we were actually wanting to do. Hence why we used part of that to sort of guide our thinking, but it's not something that we've taken on board one-to-one, because it was useful to get us started, but it wasn't really what we wanted, what we were after in terms of our end goals. Public engagement seems a key theme coming through the We Value Nature 10 days. Oh, well, I'd say so, definitely, because I mean, if we don't get the proper people talking about this, it'll just be us, right? And I'd like to think that we're all important people, but actually, it's a big market, and it's a big world out there, and people have other things on their mind, and I'm sure you've noticed. So we need to really make the case, and we really need to make it obvious that investing in nature is the proper thing to do, is the proper way forward.
Yeah, and if I can build on that, from our experience from more than 43 projects in and across Europe around the water replenishment, we've also seen that it's so important to have the public engagement, have the community engagement, because sometimes part of the nature restoration that you do impacts them directly. So for example, it's to put it very black and white, it takes away their land to grow crop on, because you're going to give that back to nature to have more wetlands or to let a river better meander. So there is always a part where public engagement is super important, not only for the appreciation of nature, but also making them understand what benefits there are for water quality, for water quantity, in the end, better yields or recreation opportunities. So sometimes people might be on the receiving end of that, or they might be on a different angle. So I would always recommend that the public engagement is super important, and it can be really helpful to build the case. And I think everybody now coming out of COVID or working through the third wave, we've all looked at nature, I think, with different eyes. So this is also really a great moment to connect to that public engagement and appreciation of nature.
I'll actually point interested readers to the report. One of the projects that we have there is actually exactly with farmers in Valencia, I think it was about 100 farmers for citrus, so oranges, mandarins, lemons, etc. And that was all about building the case with them that investing in proper water management and these sorts of things makes sense, makes oh, excuse me, makes business sense for them as well. And what we found talking to the project partners there really is the engagement is key. At first, it's a bit more difficult to get started, but to do that, you need to do also to do the proper outreach to the farmers on the ground, talk to them, convince them that it makes sense, and then they actually start talking between each other, and then the thing really picks up once they hear about the benefits. Do you utilize a KPI to measure benefits from community social engagement projects or actions? I'd say right now, no, in terms of the methodology and what we provide. But I know from the way Coca-Cola do the funding proposals for these sorts of projects, that there is a KPI there for people reached and all these qualitative stuff that we've talked about, being properly outlined and then being able to defend those. So right now, not a proper KPI, but definitely it's taken into account.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I think it's a really interesting point. So as said, I think this field of natural capital accounting is so fresh, it's so young and new. This might be an interesting point to see how this develops over time, because as just said, and also put forward by some of the other participants, public engagement and community interaction is so important. So it's really great to see how we could further structure that within the developments of this topic.
And I have one thing coming out of the go-to meeting that my colleague has just shared, is if biodiversity data is consistently collected, would it be possible to overcome the limitations you explained? I would say, in terms of the limitations for valuation, still no, because really what's coming out of the conservation sphere right now is the ways we have for valuing biodiversity right now, the science is just not good enough. So we can get an answer, but it won't necessarily be a very good answer or a very useful answer. But if we do measure biodiversity properly, we still have that actionable information that we really need. You know, how much habitats do we have? What's the quality? What's the species we need to be aware of and we need to care about? That's already actionable information. And I think that's even sometimes more valuable than hiding something behind a euro value, because biodiversity is so complicated and so multifaceted. You need to be measuring it on the ground and you need to properly be managing it on the ground. And I see one more question about ongoing monitoring, and this will be the last question we address because we are nearly out of time, and I don't want to keep you. Ongoing monitoring, yes, it happens. What Coke do is every year you need to report back that these projects, well, the project partners or whomever inherits these, and usually it's sort of the local Coca-Cola branch, they need to report back that the projects are still happening, the benefits are still there, and only then can you actually count the benefit. And then whatever that accounting is gets audited for everything that happens in the Coke sphere around the world. I do believe it's Ernst & Young that does that in the US. So there is some monitoring here, and that's actually really important because for any nature-based solution project, if you don't let it persist and you don't make sure it persists, you don't get the benefits in the future, obviously. Okay, I say with this we wrap up. 2 more minutes in here, so if there's some very, very burning questions, do add them. But otherwise, what I'd say is please do follow our report, check it out, let us know what you think. Thank you very much, and yeah, we're really pleased to have you, really pleased to be having this discussion. Yeah, for me, thank you.
Thank you as well from my side. I hope this was insightful. It was a good way forward for you to explore, and let us know any questions and remarks. And we'll be looking forward to hearing from you. So have a great day.
Oh, and as well, we will be following up with you after this event with some feedback forms for the We Value Nature 10-day challenge. Do engage in that as well. And as well, we will share with you this mural board. All that you see here will remain, so you'll be able to explore it in your own time, share it with colleagues or whatever. Yeah. Thank you again. Thank you very much for being here. And yes, looking forward to hearing from you. Otherwise, we'll be in touch.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.